Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. Now guys, I have a very special video for all of you today. In today's video, we're going to be discussing another one of the Titanic's passengers. However, what makes this passenger on the Titanic so special is that this passenger was the last living survivor of the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Now, in case you haven't guessed it yet, which I'm pretty sure a good number of you have, the passenger we're going to be talking about today is Millvina Dean. Now, at the time that she was on board the Titanic, Millvina Dean was only 2 months old, so she was an incredibly young baby at the time. Now, unfortunately, Millvina Dean did pass away somewhat recently in the year 2009, but it's important to note that she lived a very full and very fulfilling life. And I thought it would be a good way to pay tribute to her and her family by telling the story of Millvina Dean and her family, so you all can get to know who she was and who her family was a little bit better in this video. Alright guys, well hey, with the intro out of the way, let's now tell the story of Millvina Dean, the last living survivor of the RMS Titanic. Oh, and hey, if you haven't yet, if you would like to take a couple extra steps to help support the channel a little bit more, there's a merch store and a Patreon for this channel in the links below. Thank you all so much for all your support. Millvina Dean was born on February 2nd, 1912. Her father was a man by the name of Bertram Dean, and her mother was a woman by the name of Georgette Dean. Millvina Dean also had an older brother who was named after her father. Her older brother's name was also Bertram Dean. Millvina Dean was born within the country of England, and in the months leading up to her birth, her family had been experiencing incredibly hard times financially. They were really struggling to make ends meet within England during this time period. So, before Millvina was born, the family decided that they should try to immigrate to the United States. You see, Millvina's father had family that lived within the state of Kansas, and they were planning to open up a tobacco shop there, so Millvina Dean's father was hoping to help co-own the business with his relatives over in Kansas. This is why the family decided to try to immigrate from England to the United States. They really thought that they would have better opportunities over in America than they did in their home country. After Millvina was born, the family booked passage on a ship from England over to the U.S. However, as hard as I tried, I wasn't able to find the name of the ship that they had originally booked passage on. However, it's important to note that right before they were due to leave England on this particular vessel, there was a massive coal strike occurring in England at the time period, and their passage on this particular vessel was canceled due to a coal shortage. However, their ticket was then transferred from this particular vessel over to the White Star Line's brand new RMS Titanic. This was the ship that they were now going to sail across the Atlantic on. The Dean family was given third-class tickets on board the Titanic, and on April 10, 1912, the family boarded the Titanic in Southampton to make their way to the United States in hopes of a better life. Now, unfortunately, we don't know much about the Dean family's actions on board the RMS Titanic during the ship's maiden voyage. There just simply isn't that much information out there on this topic. However, from what little information there is out there on this topic, it does seem like the Dean family enjoyed themselves very much on the White Star Line's brand new Revolutionary Ocean liner. Now, on the night of April the 14th, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., it seems like the Dean family was already in their stateroom for the evening. Millvina, her older brother, and her mom were already in bed. However, it seems like her father was still awake at this time. Millvina said in a later interview that her father felt the impact between the RMS Titanic and the iceberg, and he left their cabin shortly after to go and try to figure out what was going on. How long he was gone isn't exactly clear. However, it seems like that after a relatively short time, Millvina's dad returned to the cabin and told his wife that they needed to get their children up out of bed, and they needed to go up to the boat deck as quickly as possible. She also said that her father told her mom that something pretty serious was going on with the Titanic. Now, despite the quick actions of Millvina's dad, the Dean family had a very difficult time in making their way up to the Titanic's boat deck where the lifeboats were on the night of the sinking. And this was simply because the Dean family was in third class on board the Titanic. And you see, under normal circumstances, like if the Titanic is at sea and not sinking, third-class passengers aren't allowed on the Titanic's boat deck. That part of the ship was reserved for first and second-class passengers only. However, on the night of the sinking, despite what many Titanic rumors would have you believe, the third-class passengers were not locked below decks. That isn't what happened at all. The main reason why the third-class passengers had such a difficult time in making their way up to the Titanic's boat deck is simply because they did not know where they were supposed to go. And they were also unfamiliar with that part of the ship because they were normally not allowed there. And yeah, that was simply it. And another big problem was the Titanic's crew did a very poor job in how they handled the evacuation of the third-class passengers. Many of the third-class passengers didn't speak English. The Titanic's crew had a difficult time talking to them. And, the ones who did speak English and stuff, well, if they didn't talk to a member of the Titanic's crew and if they weren't told exactly where they needed to go, they would go to other areas on the ship where they thought they were supposed to go in the event of an emergency, like the Titanic's aft well deck and the stern section. That was where they were supposed to go in the event of an emergency, but there's no lifeboats there. So they're like, okay, we're here. What do we do? The lifeboats are up there on the boat deck. How do we get there? They didn't know. But you see, the Titanic's crew had opened up doorways in the third-class sections that provided easy access to the boat deck where the lifeboats were, but due to the poor handling of the third-class passengers due to the Titanic's crew's actions, many of the third-class passengers simply just did not know where those doorways were, and they did not know how to get up to the boat deck where the lifeboats were. Information was the biggest enemy for the third-class passengers on the night of the sinking. However, ultimately, the Dean family did make their way up to the Titanic's boat deck. However, it seems like it happened pretty late into the disaster. You see, Millvina Dean, her mom, and her older brother eventually found a place in lifeboat number 10, which left the Titanic at 1:50 a.m., so very close to the end of the Titanic's life. They were very lucky to say the least. However, unfortunately, Millvina's dad did not find a place in this lifeboat, and he would lose his life when the RMS Titanic went down. However, Millvina Dean, her mom, and her older brother would all make it to the Carpathia and survive the sinking of the Titanic. Once the Carpathia reached New York City, Millvina's mother had to spend several weeks in a hospital recovering from everything she went through on board the RMS Titanic on the night of the sinking. After she was released, she decided that she did not want to live in the United States without her husband, so she decided to take the entire family back to the UK. The White Star Line was kind enough to offer the Dean family free passage back to the UK on board the RMS Adriatic. However, during the voyage home, once many of the passengers and crew on board the ship learned that Millvina was a baby that had survived the sinking of the Titanic, well, Millvina became quite the celebrity on board the Adriatic. Many people on board the ship wanted to spend some time with her and hold this baby that survived the sinking of the Titanic. In fact, there was so much arguing between people on board the Adriatic to spend time with Millvina that one of the Adriatic's crew members had to tell them that they were not allowed to spend any longer than 10 minutes holding Millvina Dean. This was her first taste as a celebrity that had survived the sinking of the Titanic. Now, throughout Millvina Dean's early childhood, she had no knowledge that she was even a passenger on board the RMS Titanic. Her mom didn't tell her that she was even on board the ship until she was around 8 years old. And given the fact that she was only 2 months old when the ship sank, of course she would have no memory of the event. However, even after she found out that she was a Titanic survivor, she really didn't do anything with that knowledge throughout the rest of her life. At least, she didn't do anything with it until the later years of her life. She preferred to stay well under the radar when it came to the fact that she was on board the Titanic. She didn't want the attention. She didn't want people to come up and start talking to her about the Titanic. She wanted to live a quiet life. However, once she got older, she then decided to start participating in Titanic-related events. Like she would go to Titanic historic meetups, start talking to people that she was on board the Titanic, and start sharing some of her mother's stories about the Titanic, and so on and so forth. Now, by the time Millvina Dean really did start participating in Titanic-related events, she was well into her 70s. However, once she did start participating in these things, she went all in. She started doing television interviews, she started going to meetups from the Titanic Historical Society, and believe it or not, in the year 1997, she even did a transatlantic crossing on the QE2 with several members of the Titanic Historical Society. Whenever she showed up at Titanic-related events, everybody loved to see her and talk to her, and they just said that she was a very outgoing and fun person to be with. Now, During an interview, she even talked about one of her not-so-pleasant encounters at a Titanic-related event. She said that while she was minding her own business talking to people, a lady came up to her and, I kid you not, asked her if she could cut off a tiny piece of her hair to keep with her, and at which point she said, "No, that is stupid. Why would you even ask me something like that?" And when I heard that, I'm like, really? Like, somebody really went up to her and asked her to cut off a piece of her hair? When I hear stories like that, I can kind of understand why Millvina Dean wanted to remain out of the Titanic spotlight for as long as she did, because no one likes stuff like that to happen to them. Now, despite how active Millvina Dean was with all things Titanic during the later years of her life, one thing she absolutely refused to do was go and see the James Cameron Titanic film when it was released. I'm pretty sure James Cameron even invited her to the film's premiere, but she didn't go. When she was asked why, she simply said that it would remind her too much of her father. You know, by going to watch that movie, it would bring back all these memories that her mom told her about her father and the sinking of the Titanic. She also said that the entire time watching the film, she would do nothing but think about where was her father when all this was going on. So she just didn't want to go through all that, so she did not want to go and see the movie. And honestly, I completely understand where she's coming from. If I was in her shoes, I would probably feel the exact same way. She said that when she saw the original Titanic film, A Night to Remember, in 1958, she had nightmares for a long time after seeing that movie. So honestly, I completely understand why she did not want to go and see the James Cameron Titanic film. After living a very long and very fulfilling life, Millvina Dean passed away on the morning of May 31st, 2009. After she passed away, her body was cremated, and then several months later, her ashes were taken to the city of Southampton, and her ashes were spread in the docks of Southampton, in the exact area where 97 years earlier, she boarded the RMS Titanic for her maiden voyage. After Millvina Dean passed away, there were no more survivors left alive who actually were on board the RMS Titanic on the night she went down. She was the very last person who was there on that terrible, terrible night. After Millvina Dean passed away, the story of the Titanic now is just one of history, you know, where no one is left alive who actually saw the event and was there when it happened. The story of the Titanic is now told by those who heard the story of the ship from those who were there. With all of the survivors of the Titanic now gone, it's up to all of us who came later to remember all of those who lost their lives on that ship, and we all need to do our part to make sure that their story is never forgotten. This is Sam from Historic Travels. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure you leave it a like, be sure to subscribe, and thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.